The slow etude for euphonium and tuba in Year D is the Adagio cantabile by Gallay. And let's note, just to make sure that you're practicing the right thing, this is different than the slow etude for trombone in this set, so make sure that you're playing the right thing. Now let's define our terms. Adagio cantabile means to play slowly and in a singing style. Then we have poco a poco accelerando. And this one is a little bit redundant, honestly, as it means to, little by little, gradually increase in tempo. The pairing of these two terms is likely there to remind you not to get faster too quickly, as the increase in speed should be spaced out over a little over 4 measures. And then we have a tempo, which just means to return to the previous tempo. Now, speaking of tempo, the instructions indicate that this etude should be played with the quarter note at 60 to 72 beats per minute. I think that this one sounds best when it tends toward the faster end of this tempo range, though there should always be some push and pull included for musical effect. Now, related to that is a concept of subdivision, or thinking the eighth note pulse. And that is vitally important, and maybe even more so in slow pieces than in fast ones. Now, hopefully you're going to have some variation in tempo for expressive effect, and subdivision adds an element of consistency of rhythm and time. It helps to ensure that your expressiveness doesn't begin to sound like wrong rhythms. Slow down and speed up the subdivisions as needed, and you can even practice this by playing the piece subdivided into eighth notes, and then transition just to thinking those subdivisions in your head. Now let's talk about ornaments. This etude includes a number of grippetti, or turns, which are ornaments where you play the upper neighbor of the written note, followed by the written note, and then the lower neighbor, and then the written note again before moving on to the next note. All of the turns in this etude can be played as 30-second notes on the and of two, as indicated in the examples at the bottom of the page, though playing these with a slightly uneven speed by leaning on the first note can be quite musically effective. Make a special note of the turns with accidentals above and or below them. An accidental above the turn marking indicates that this accidental should be applied to the upper note of the turn, and vice versa for an accidental marked below the turn marking. Number 6. Plan and mark your breaths. The breathing is sometimes straightforward in this etude and sometimes not. Observe the written phrase markings as much as possible, but there are times, particularly toward the end of the assigned section, where a breath might need to be taken at a not too desirable place. Planning and marking your breaths ahead of time, besides promoting consistency and fighting nervousness, will help you to practice taking the more inconvenient breaths in a way that is as unobtrusive as possible. Marking breaths also helps you to avoid the problem of skipping a good breathing place because you don't feel like you're out of air, and then yet running out before you get to the next good spot. If you've penciled in a breath, it will remind you that you need a breath in that place, even if you don't feel like you need it in the moment. Now let's talk about the staccato markings. Most of this etude is slurred, but you do have a couple of places where the 16th notes are marked staccato. These notes occur in the context of a moving musical line, and clipping them will harm the musical effect. Tongue them lightly, but otherwise don't try too hard to make them sound really, really short. Just make them, still follow the musical flow of the phrase, but otherwise, don't go out of your way to make them sound super short. If you're tonguing and not slurring, it'll probably be enough. Number 8, this is very important. Use the fourth valve. There are a number of low concert Cs and B naturals in this etude, both of which are notoriously sharp on 3-valve instruments, but are mostly corrected when the fourth valve is used. Now, hopefully, if you have a fourth valve, you've already learned to use it. If not, this will be a great time to start. The fourth valve replaces the 1 and 3 fingering combination, and then 2 and 4 replaces 1, 2, and 3. Remember that in an all-state band audition, little discrepancies in pitch can make the difference between 2 or 3 chairs, or even between making the band and not making it. Don't needlessly damage your audition by not using the fourth valve and thus playing really, really sharp on those notes. Number 9, mark accidentals, odd fingerings, and other items that are likely to cause difficulties. This etude is in an easy key, right? Concert B flat major. But there are lots of accidentals and other surprises that could cause problems for you. I recommend marking in advance anything that you think might trip you up. And in addition, mark anything that you miss while practicing, even if you do so only one time. Making a mark in your music will help to ensure that you really do make that mistake only once. And in fact, this is a good policy to follow with every piece of music that you play, not just this etude. And finally, think like a singer. Brass playing is really more like singing than playing any other instrument is. The thought process is very similar that we use compared to what a singer uses, and we just move the vibration from the vocal cords to the lips. Etudes like this are intended to promote and help you to demonstrate the singing style that all great brass players learn to achieve in slower pieces especially. Imagine how a great opera singer, or even how a great ballad singer in more popular styles, might interpret a tune like this, and then see if you can emulate them. The euphonium and tuba are both capable of extremely lush and expressive sounds in the hands of skilled players. Your job is to practice enough to be one of those skilled players.